All right, here we are.
We got you on finally.
I know. It's a long time.
I know, man. I've been excited for this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm excited for every podcast I do, right?
Yeah.
But I've been excited to have you on because you're fun. You're an interesting guy.
Yeah, and we get to be in person.
Right, which is so nice.
I know.
My last couple Guestisodes, obviously, have had to be through Skype, which is really sad. But there's something else. There's something different about being able to sit down with somebody, have a nice little glass of bourbon.
Cheers, man. Absolutely.
Be able to enjoy it.
I know. It's been really weird just working, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, here in just a second. But, like, everyone's wearing masks. And literally the other day, walking into work, outside, there's a guy I work with that didn't have his mask on. And I was like, that's what you look like. Right. I've never seen you from the eyes down. Never.
Is so
it blew me away.
That is so weird. I haven't had to deal with that yet.
Yeah, I did a double take, and he just like gave me the weirdest side eye, like I was like checking him out or something weird. But I was like, no, dude, I literally have never seen you without a mask on.
That is wild. It really is weird to think about, though. Like, I would have never thought about the fact that like there's so many people that I've seen now, and I have no idea what they actually look like because they have a face mask on.
I know.
That is weird. So, all right, who is JT?
I'm
or
JT.
I affectionately call you G.
G. That's right. I'm JT Brittingham. I grew up here in Columbia, just down the street in Lexington. I work as a quality assurance supervisor for a local pharmaceutical corporation here. Went to school, Furman. Go Paladins.
That's right.
Go Dens, as they say.
F you.
That's right. Yes, we have quite the fun.
The Furman University Christian Knights. Right?
That's a myth, okay, according to Furman policy. So
I'm required to say, by law, is not the Furman University Christian Knights.
That's right.
We're the Paladins.
That's right.
Cool. So what did you study at Furman?
So Furman, actually kind of unique. Well, not unique, but it's a liberal arts. So I did the pre-med tract, but you can major in whatever the heck you want. So there's like pre-med tract, which is just like a list of courses that you have to be pre-med, but then you can major in music. We had music majors in the pre-med, and then I was a biology major because that's just easy because biology courses,
easy.
Yeah, so you don't have to double dip.
So easy.
Which is really funny because the music, Furman's really known for their music program. And so like having a music in pre-med is just like, those people are insane. Yeah. Because they just like have no life. They're just practicing or studying for class.
We're fortunate in this world for people like you that say that something like biology is easy, because I am serious when I say, I mean, I was nowhere close to science. I have a bachelor of science, right?
Right.
But I was in business, right? So I had to take 2 science courses in college. I was required to have 2 to graduate. Yeah. And one of them was online astronomy, and the other one was cultural geology.
Ooh.
I still couldn't tell. I have no idea what that meant.
I was like, that sounds interesting.
We walked in the first day, and the guy was like, all right, so I'm here being paid as a researcher, and I don't want to be teaching a class, but I have to. So we're going to have 4 quizzes throughout the semester. You can drop one. This is going to be the easiest class you take in college. And I was like, yes. Yes. That's exactly what I need in a science course.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So biology. Why did you want to go into biology?
So from probably high school, I had an interest in the medical field. So I did a class at Lexington High School, and where you could actually take the class, and at the end of it, you would come out with your CNA, your certified nursing assistant.
Oh, cool.
And so got to even work in a doctor's office for like a week or 2, and then we took care of completely dependent patients for several weeks at a nursing home, which was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And very sad.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people that like, they can't dress themselves, they can't feed themselves.
That has to be an incredible experience though for especially a teenager.
It really was. And it was sad because like our teacher told us that we would give them the most attention that they would see all year. Yeah. And then, and it's not, I'm not trying to like slam the workers there because they have to take care of so many people, right? And a lot of them are completely dependent, right? So, which takes a lot of work and a lot of attention,
right?
And so, so it was sad. I mean, it really was. And then it really resonated. I had my grandmother had dementia and ended up being in a nursing home, and so it just like brought me back
Yeah.
as an adult.
Yeah.
And we were thankful that we were local and could go visit her often.
Right.
That was also another sad part. It's like, that's pretty rare sometimes.
Right. It really is.
Yeah.
It's,
a lot of people
it's
just
heartbreaking.
put their parents in a nursing home and then never see them again.
Yeah,
And
it really is awful.
Yeah.
It really is awful. I think that's one of the. There are a lot of parts of our society that are not great, but I think that one of them is our lack of care for elderly people. Is absolutely awful. It
Yeah.
really is. And I mean, there's a lot of developed countries like that now. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some countries that are pushing towards, voluntary euthanasia and stuff like that. And a lot of it is so that if you do get old enough or, you don't have any family or anybody around you, you have the opportunity to choose to just,
Right.
have assisted suicide.
Right.
And that's absolutely
Yeah.
horrible. Thankfully, we're not at that point in the United States, but elderly care in the United States is absolutely abhorrent. It's
Yeah.
really terrible.
Yeah.
But so cool. So I guess that experience, you've always been kind of interested in
Right.
the medical field.
Right.
That pushes you to go major in biology. Right?
Pre-med. And then, so I didn't make the grades to go to, be competitive to go to med school. So that was, junior year, talking to my counselor. I didn't make bad grades
Right.
by any stretch.
But you just got to be.
Right. Yeah,
Way up
exactly.
top.
Exactly. Which goes to show our doctors and super smart people.
Right.
Just super
Right.
smart people. I did make bad grades, but they're like, you're probably not going to be competitive. Even if you were to take, get some good, MCAT scores, whatever.
Right.
You're not going to probably be competitive. And so that threw me for a loop. I'm already looking, what am I doing after college?
Right.
What do I do? And so I was involved in my church in Greenville, and they had they instituted a program the year before I graduated called the Fellows Program through the Fellows Initiative. So there's, locations all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and then even some in Texas. And what it is, it's you intern with the church. Sorry, excuse me. And you work. We had layman jobs. We didn't work. We didn't have clergy jobs. We didn't work at the church. I interned at an environmental consulting firm. And and then a lot of the coursework we did through the church was around faith and work and how are you a Christian in a normal day-to-day job, right? What does that look like? And so I traveled. It was actually kind of fun because I had never traveled since I was a little kid. The only time I flew was when I think I was 5 years old, and we went to New York City. And doing it big.
Yeah. Being from Lexington, South Carolina.
Oh yeah.
You go to New York.
5-year-old kid, FAO Schwartz, the big toy store.
Yeah.
One of the, my mom tells a story from that trip to anyone and everyone who will listen to it. I'll tell it. Why not? It'll be funny. And people can get a kick out of it. So
that's what this is long form.
Right.
This is why
long form. I'm a huge Star Wars fan and have been since that year, little kid. And so my mom jokes that they made the mistake of going to the toy store and let me get one of the little snow speeders from Empire Strikes Back that Luke flies around to fight the little AT-AT walkers. I'm really nerding out. It's okay. But I wanted nothing else but to go back to the hotel and play with that toy.
Yeah.
And my older sister was going to go ice skating at the little ice rink right there with my dad. And so, they're out ice skating around, and I'm with my mom, and I do one of the scream, lay on the ground, roll around tantrums. And I'm trying to remember who all approached my mom, but it was a child psychologist came up to my mom. Someone, I forget who the other person was, but then eventually the police showed up and they were questioning my mom and my aunt. They're like, "Is this your child?" And my mom was like, "Yes,
you can take him if you want him."
This is my child. He is throwing a tantrum.
Right. Only in New York would that happen.
Oh
That's ridiculous. I thought if that happened in Colombia, they'd be like, "Hey, get better hold of your kid.
Oh yeah,
get on now, get out of here."
So yeah, my mom loves to just tell, and if no one's ever heard that story, they just always.
That's just a classic 4 or 5 year old throwing a tantrum. That's hilarious though. Child psychologist. What was she gonna do?
Right? Yeah, I don't know. Let me.
Right.
Lay him back, and we'll talk about his feelings.
Right.
I don't know, but so sorry, that was a little off track. But I got to travel, because what we did was groundwater remediation. Essentially, there was, in a nutshell, there was like a spill of some chemical, or we had a site that was an old gas station. And when they installed the tank in the ground and the pipe that goes up to the pumps, the pipe that went up had a leak. And so the guy was like, yeah, pretty much every gallon someone put in their car, a gallon went into the ground and into the groundwater. And so
that's not good.
And then this company essentially cleaned the spills, try and get the groundwater and other things back to normal, so to speak, which is pretty fascinating.
Right.
Never even knew that existed.
Right.
We went out. The coolest part was we got to go out to Kansas City, and it was cold.
That's so weird, because when I think about like Missouri,
yeah,
I think about like, for some reason I have in my mind that it's really hot. Mm-hmm. And that's not true.
Especially in the like wintertime.
Yeah.
It's very cold, especially coming from Columbia.
Right.
Super hot, super humid, almost all year long.
Like if I was faced with single digit temperatures, I literally do not own clothing.
Yeah.
That would be able to protect me from that.
Yeah. I remember getting back to the hotel. What you would do is, you'd stick like a tube down in the ground. You have a pump, and it would eventually suck up the water, and you would sample it. But then I remember getting back to my hotel, and I couldn't move my fingers. They literally were stuck like this, and I was just like, It was wild, but it was a great experience, and that eventually how I landed my job where I work now. And so where I started initially was in our environmental affairs department. And so what I did was kind of the opposite. So in my internship, we did kind of cleanup, and on my first job, we did prevention, right? So I handled all hazardous, non-hazardous waste. We have wastewater from our production process that I would test in the lab for just some basic like pH and concentration of salt, essentially in the water. Just make sure it met specifications before we would send it to the city treatment plant, and then a lot of our kind of green initiatives, which is also cool to kind of get exposed to that. I know that's kind of been a hot button, right? Kind of the green energy and
right.
Stuff, which we can touch on too if we want.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Down the road.
That's pretty cool. So what, I guess, how does that lead you into, what exactly are you doing now?
Right.
So it's in the pharmaceutical industry,
right.
But like what?
So my specific role...
I was like, pull the mic, I guess, a little in front of you. A little more.
Yeah,
you can pull it over just a little bit. There you go.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's
better.
good.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
What I do now, I work very closely with our labs, mostly. Okay. So we have a chemistry lab and a microbiology lab. And so a lot of what I do is look at their method development work, kind of their protocols and things. So, every drug that we make has to meet certain criteria for different tests. And so, and then they have to validate those tests for each new product, or if there's a change that needs to happen, they have to revalidate and those types of things. So I work closely with them and review over those things. So I have a background, obviously in biology, and then through pre-med, I had coursework in chemistry.
Right.
And then I do a lot of our annual product trending. So that's something I generate. A lot of what I do, I look at other people's work and kind of look at it, make sure it looks good. And
right.
But the annual product reviews kind of are what I generate. And so that essentially takes a 12-month snapshot of a given drug that we make. And we look at it holistically from, we look, how many did we, simple things like how many batches did we make? How many did we sell? Did we have to throw any away? Were there manufacturing investigations? Were there, customer complaints?
Right.
Validation work around there. We have a whole list of procedures and test methods that, what was updated around this drug product it's very, very holistic, very in depth.
Right. So it sounds like there's a lot of scrutiny that goes into it.
Yes. Hopefully we'll communicate that through this podcast that are, especially in the United States. I don't know as well about like Europe and like Canada or some of those places, but like our pharmaceutical industry is very tightly regulated. Yeah. So the first day of what we call boot camp is like, we have like a week long, I think it's a week long now. It's the length has fluctuated since I've been there, but we call it boot camp. It's like an orientation. And so just kind of get you familiar with the company. But then also one of the first days they show us this 60-minute clip, 60 minutes, the show clip of a documentary they did around NECC, or the New England Compounding Center, and where one of their sites, I think it was down in South America somewhere, I want to say. But their kind of quality controls got out of control, and it ended up like tons of people in the United States now have like fungal meningitis and like won't be able to get rid of it. And
for the rest of their life.
For the rest of their life, yeah.
Because of a specific drug that they were taking coming out of one plant. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, so it was like kind of a scared straight. Like right when you walk in the door, like if you screw up, you could kill. And it's true. Like it really is. And it's a very good kind of cold water over the head. Like, no, like what we do here is serious. Like we could, and they always tell you, like, you know, if you don't feel comfortable giving a drug we sell to like your mom or my son now, like you shouldn't sign off on that, or you shouldn't, you know, that shouldn't go out the door. Right. Like you should feel confident that if you walk into a hospital and you see my company's name across whatever drugs going into, you know, your whatever relative, best friend, not your anybody, you should feel confident, like that's a good drug. Right. That's not going to harm them in any way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what type of drugs, I guess, do you have experience with? Is it like a wide variety? Like in manufacturing of these pharmaceutical drugs, do they have like one manufacturing place over here that only manufactures this one drug, or can you do a wide gambit of different drugs?
Right. So my company is so, you know, you'll hear the term big pharma. So, you know, those are the Pfizers, Modernas, Johnson Johnsons. And they have a very wide range. And we do as a small, locally owned, and I think, you know, we probably have 2,000 plus employees, I think now.
Which is considered a small pharmaceutical company.
Right, that's small.
Which is interesting.
Roughly, and, you know, and we're constantly growing. Right. And so I might be lowballing that number, but I would probably say $2,000 plus at least. Not on site at a time, maybe per se, because we're 24/7, 365. Right. And we have shift work, and so not all those people are on site all at one time, potentially. But and we have pretty wide range of products that we make. But then there are some, there are some that are just pretty specialized. Right. For a while, my company was specialized. We made inhalation solutions and suspensions. And that's still our kind of like bread and butter.
Gotcha.
And then we have now, and it's kind of blown up, this, we call it the 503B outsourcing division. And so, which is really interesting because so what that division does is make, a lot of the drugs you'll see are like morphine, kind of like a fentanyl.
Like heavy opiates?
Right.
Type
Well,
thing?
some, but then like just more, they're like injectable products. So like
Gotcha. Okay.
Our inhalation solutions you would put in a nebulizer. I don't know if you know what that is.
No, I do not know what a nebulizer is.
Back in the day, it'd be like the size of like a VCR. You'd have this mask you'd put on and you pour the medicine in and then it vaporizes it and you would breathe it in.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And now, you know, they have one that fit in your pocket and you just put it in.
That's wild.
Yeah, crazy.
Technology has increased.
Because I remember using a nebulizer as a kid growing up. Like, remember, we'd sit in a chair and the thing would sit over there and it'd be loud, like, and you just
breathe it in.
Yeah.
And now that you mention it, actually, I had asthma as a kid, and I do remember actually having to use one of those for that. Yeah. That's interesting. Huh.
And so our outsourcing divisions are more like IV bag products, syringe, anything that goes into a syringe. A lot of those are like kind of like those morphines, hydromorphones, kind of deal. And so, and what's kind of unique about that is that we make those because they're on drug shortage, which like you'd probably ask the majority of Americans, like, are there a drug shortage problem in the United States? And they'd be like, no, what are you talking about? Right. But the FDA gives like clearance because these drugs are short and they need them. Like these are used in surgeries, and all kinds of different things that like, and that's kind of the reason they stay on shores. Like hospitals get them and they use them, get them and they use them, because and they need them so much. And so that's been a unique kind of new wing, so to speak,
Right.
of our business.
So is there more regulation around opiates specifically? Like I know that. So right now, and I'm happy to get into it if you want. I guess
Right.
and kind of pick your brain about opiates
Sure.
specifically because there is a lot of attention in the media around drug abuse, but more
Right.
specifically drug abuse from opiates.
Right.
And you see news articles all the time, and you see on different media corporations talking about the opiate epidemic, right, that we have right now in the country, and there are tens of thousands of people every single year that die from overdosing on opiates.
Right.
Are there more I guess maybe specific regulations or stricter regulations around those?
There definitely is. So, because there's two regulatory bodies that kind of govern those things. So you have your FDA, right? That they're gonna audit and regulate over all pharmaceuticals. But then when you talk about opioids, you also add the DEA level of,
I didn't even
of
think about
oversight. And it's like that when I first started thinking about like the opioid epidemic, I was like, how are people getting this stuff?
Yeah.
Because
that's always my question too.
At least from the manufacturing side of things, like the security around it is incredible. Like we have like when we store our like raw materials, which are like it's the stuff that goes into the medicine.
Yeah, the compounds.
Right. Yeah. And so, and any finished goods, waste, you name it. Like if it's touched a controlled substance or an opioid, it goes into what we call it the vault, and it's like something out of like you'd see in a spy movie that someone's trying to get into, and it has to meet all these crazy security specifications. And like one of them is like it has to be able to withstand like some sort of, I forget the level of impact. Like if someone were to try and like ram a car into the door to try and break in and steal stuff,
wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, it's insane. And then and that's throughout anywhere it goes in our facility. Like in the labs, there's safes in the lab that only certain people can access, and it has to. They have logs where like I grabbed 2 syringes of hydromorphone out of the safe to test for X, and then here's how much I returned, and they have to keep a very detailed log of like where it all goes. Right, because if the DEA shows up and like there's discrepancies or there's
anything's off,
you could go to jail too.
Right.
Well, like that's one thing. Like they put you in prison, and then there's heavy fines, and it's crazy. So the like the FDA shows up, and they're just guys in suits, but like the DEA shows up and they have guns on their hip.
Right,
like, they ain't playing around.
No.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's pretty crazy. And so like I think about it, I'm like, how are people? Like if people are doing your job on our end, the manufacturing, like it's got to be downstream, right?
Right.
And I'm sure there's instances all up and down, like from people who make the raw compounds to manufacturers, down to pharmacies and so on and so forth. That I'm sure there's instances where things get
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things that I feel like I hear is that doctors are just freely writing those prescriptions out.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily, I'm not nearly qualified enough to be like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening, right? Because I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
But it does seem incredibly easy for a lot of people to be able to go in and get these controlled substances and be able to just roll up to a pharmacy and just pick them up, right? So do you think that there actually is an epidemic of opiates in the United States?
I think I would say so. Like even doing in my research, like I think I saw a stat. I think it was from the CDC. It was like 136 people die a day from some sort of opioid overdose. So that's not even like overdose that's specific to opioids. So that number's much higher in terms of like a drug overdose. And so, I mean, I would say so. And I think, I think what people kind of don't understand maybe is like a lot of these people maybe even come out of the hospital. Like a lot of times, like they've been in long-term care.
Yeah, apparently in 2019, nearly 50,000 people in the United States died from an opioid-involved overdose.
Yeah.
50,000 people. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. That's a lot of people.
It is. And I think, a lot of these drugs sometimes are used in like long-term, like cancer patients, maybe like who are in the hospital for a long time and incredible amounts of pain. And these drugs are, they're incredibly addictive. Right. And so, I'm sure, again, I'm not a doctor. I don't work in a hospital. So I'm not going to, I'm not an expert on like treating, like, you should not treat someone longer than a week with, but yeah. And then I think people, they're highly addictive. And so I think a lot of cases they are sent home as well. And then they abuse them. Right. Like, if you get Oxycontin and you take it home and you say, hey, take one as needed. Right. And then, but
next thing
some people are like, oh yeah, I need it.
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't feel it as bad, but I think I need it.
What makes opiates specifically so addictive?
It's through the chemical. I think it's how it interacts and affects the natural chemical pathways in your brain, right? So, I'm a little out of my depth in terms of.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. So what I mean by that is like.
Yeah.
My guess would be, and I'm not an addiction specialist by any stretch, but my guess would be like it feels good to have that pain taken care of. But it also, of course, is going to change the chemical makeup of your brain and how your brain is interacting with different sensors and like different pain levels in your body, which of course is going to be, soothing or obviously you get high from it.
Right. So an easy for addiction, like an easy example to think about is like caffeine, right? Like. Who doesn't love a cup of coffee in the morning?
Right.
But then, but your body, gets accustomed to a certain level of caffeine in your system, or, you take one of these opioids, my contact's messing up on me. And it, releases either affects, like you said, it takes away your pain, or it can release, there's like a euphoric effect for a lot of these. And that, that comes from, the dopamines and things that are released in your body. And then, over time, as those, your body gets used to it, you have to get, obviously,
I feel like you need it.
Yeah, more and more, and to get the same level of, of whatever that feeling is, you just need more and more until, and then, I think these drugs are like, they're incredibly powerful, right?
There's actually a really interesting picture. It talks about like what you can basically die from in amounts of like heroin.
We can try to figure out a way to throw this up if it's not copyrighted. Try to throw this up on the screen.
Well, fentanyl is one too to think about, and
it's like that's all it takes. So.
Right, and just thinking about some of the products we make, like the amount of actual fentanyl in a given syringe, IV bag, whatever it is incredibly small. Per milliliter. Sometimes it's only, and it's measured a lot of times in like micrograms per milliliter, which is, you'll see milligrams a ton, but micrograms, that's like multiple folds, magnitude smaller. And, helpful one, when I was thinking about fentanyl and how like powerful it is, there's a stat I read, I think it was also through the CDC, that it's 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. And so, like, morphine...
50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. That is incredibly potent.
Right. Yeah. You see in, like, the war movies, like, they're giving little syrettes of morphine to people who have bullet wounds, right? But then, too, my wife just had a baby. So one recent example that I thought of was the epidural. So, which is fentanyl and another drug, right? And so, and it's, granted, it's, I don't want to, hopefully people don't get squeamish, but like they put a needle into the spine, right, of the pregnant woman. And then they have this drip for the epidural. And I remember my wife, they have the husband leave, right, when they put the epidural in, because, you
don't want anybody passing
out. You may
out.
not think you're a pass out risk until you see someone stick a really long needle into your wife's spine. So, right. And so, and then you're just keeled over, and then they have to worry about you. So they have you leave, and they're like, come back in like 10 minutes. And then, delivery is one of the most painful things that the human body can go through, right? And I came back in the room 10 minutes later, granted, and my wife literally is having a conversation with me like this. Like going from the like worst pain of her life to her saying, I feel fine. I'm not fine, but like I don't feel anything.
Right.
Like that's how powerful this kind of stuff is, right?
That is unbelievable.
And granted, you kind of have to take into account like there's how the mode in which you put it into your body definitely affects how quickly it acts upon your body, right? So if like you're taking a pill, it's going to take longer for you to feel that effect than you take a needle and you just pop it right into your bloodstream, right? So granted, there's some caveats around all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, incredibly powerful. And we have raw fentanyl on site, and I'm still on the hazardous response team from when I was in the environmental affairs department. So this is, we have a little team of people that if we were to have like a big spill of this nasty chemical or whatever, we're, able to respond to it. Right. Mm-hmm. And the guy who comes in, he's super quirky. He's like a weird dude, but you kind of have to be, I feel like, to like teach a hazmat response. You kind of have to be kind of weird, but, but he always is at the beginning of each training. It takes a couple days, and he's like, what's the scariest chemical you have on site? And since we've brought fentanyl on site, like every time we're like fentanyl. And I mean, you can pull up like the safety data sheet because you can just Google that and pull it up, and it's acutely toxic if you, ingest it, breathe it, touch it. We have to have like special gloves for people to wear to even handle it. Right. So it's incredibly difficult.
When you say raw fentanyl?
So that's just like fentanyl powder.
Okay,
right?
just powder.
Right.
Okay.
It's not been diluted. It's not had anything added to it.
Gotcha.
So again, granted, like if you're taking raw fentanyl, it's definitely going to be way more potent than like 100 micrograms per mil.
So why does it need to be that potent? Like that's I guess one of the things that I'm kind of thinking about as I'm kind of sitting here is why make a drug that is so potent that you can have literally micrograms in order to be able to stop the pain of somebody or to be able to administer that drug. Like why does it need to be like don't we already have morphine? Don't we already have other drugs that are incredibly potent as well?
Right. I don't know the specific answer to that. I would say I would assume you need something powerful for powerful types of pain. Would be my only guess.
Well, and I guess maybe efficiency as well. Right. Like you can
use less to get the same effect. Right.
Right.
So I'm sure there's even like a cost analysis done in that. And what I learned too, and fentanyl has been like a hot button one ever since kind of George Floyd and all those things. He was found right. Well. Yeah, but I think at least to me, it definitely brought it into the mainstream.
Yeah,
I think that's another problem, right, with this opioid crisis that people call it. It's not like no one really talks about it, right? Until like you know somebody, or
something like George Floyd happens.
Right, exactly. And because again, I was like, how are people getting this stuff? Yeah. And I was looking in my research, most cases of someone who like ODs from fentanyl, it's usually been added. I think was it Will last?
Yeah, my last guest
episode.
Yeah,
where he said he took something and he didn't know fentanyl was added to it.
Right.
And so that now and that people are making fentanyl like the website called it illicitly. So so someone's out there Walter White and fentanyl, right, and lacing it into the other drugs probably they make and not telling people. And then, which that was a scary thought. Like I already, we've talked about how potent this stuff is, how careful you have to be. And then you have someone who I guarantee you doesn't have any kind of science degree probably. And they're just probably, I don't know,
making batches of it.
Yeah. Making batches of it.
And across the border.
Right. And so,
or directly into the United States.
Right. And so, that's an incredibly scary thought to think that someone with no expertise is putting a incredibly powerful drug into other drugs, right? And then, and that's what kills people, right?
Right.
One, they don't know it's there. And if they do know it's there, you have someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and all, who knows how much, right?
Right.
Like, and that's the golden question, is like, in terms of dosage, and that
it doesn't take a lot to kill you.
No, it doesn't. And it depends, granted, on, your size, sex, weight.
Right.
And so experience around other drugs and other things. But I mean, yeah, it's incredibly powerful, and it doesn't take much at all. And so it's super scary to think that someone who doesn't know what the heck they're doing is putting that stuff in for people to take. And then,
So what? I think I've read some different statistics and different articles and stuff around how the United States is one of the most heavily medicated countries in the entire world. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people blame pharmaceutical companies for that, because they basically are saying pharmaceutical companies have an incentive to create drugs that may be addictive, to create drugs that people are going to feel like they need, to be able to create a drug that's going to, quote, fix all of your problems, or if it doesn't fix your problem, at least make you feel like it's fixed, right?
Right.
And that doesn't even necessarily have to deal with opiates, right, at all. But what do you think, I guess, maybe the pharmaceutical industry's role is in, how heavily medicated the United States is as a whole? Like, do you really kind of buy into or think, like, what do you think about kind of like the whole big pharma, is basically running everything because they're making a lot of money and they're trying to drug up the states,
Well, I know my company has tried to even sell some alternatives, right? Or try and I think one of the biggest obstacles is to get pharmacists and doctors to change how they operate. Right? I mean, because, a lot of doctors probably like, well, the way I do things isn't broke, so why fix it? Right? And so I think a lot of it is getting buy-in, right? From, if a doctor won't buy that medication, that alternative medication that might be just as effective, right?
Right.
You're not going to make money.
Right.
And so, at the end of the day, pharmaceutical, especially manufacturers, are businesses. They have to make money, right? And so, now granted, and this is something I've learned, and when I talk about my work experience, I'm like, there's an incredible tension between quality and quantity, right? And because one, you want quality, you don't want to harm anybody. You have patient's interest first, obviously. You don't go into a medical field unless you care for people, right? Right. But then it's a business. You have to make money. Yeah. So there is an incredible tension. Like, to deny that, I think, would be silly. Right. And so a lot of times it's demand, right? And a lot of it too, I think, kind of goes back to these drug shortages, right? Like, these are drugs that doctors need. They're like, I don't have time to try out this new, treatment method. I know morphine works. We don't have it. Just give me the, and let's go. Like, I know this works. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. Right. And so I think getting buy-in from the people downstream, I think, is a huge portion of it. And then too, like, and getting, doing the research and like, right. Like, big pharma can do that. Like, I think COVID vaccine is a great example, right? With this mRNA vaccine that really was untested for the most part, I feel like. At least not mainstream, right? Like, we don't know.
Well, it wasn't allowed, right? Like, an mRNA vaccine wasn't allowed to be used or distributed in the United States, right? Under FDA regulation?
Yes. Because they had to grant emergency authorization for, which I know a lot of people kind of get. So the whole, like, approval process, I think, because I know, like, listen to some, like, political pundits, especially, when they paused the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, right? They had these people that had severe blood clotting issues. I think mostly women, right?
Yeah, I think
if I'm not mistaken, and they were like, pump the brakes, let's look at this.
Yeah,
and
I think that if I'm correct, I believe every single person actually was a woman, and
Right.
that were all, with the vast majority of them under the age of 60 as
Right.
well. So it was primarily young women,
Right.
in both in Europe and the United States.
Right. And I know, listening to some political pundits, they were so frustrated and mad. Like, why would you do that? Like, we're trying to roll out these vaccines, get as many people done. And I'm like, if they find, if you think about it in like a grocery store, if they were to test one bag of lettuce and there was salmonella in it,
Right.
you're going to recall all the lettuce.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you're not going to leave that out there, right? And so I was like, no, of course you're going to stop, right? And look at this and be like, because one, like, that's just people who have reported it, right? Like, who knows how many haven't reported it, right? And then if it's only in women, especially young women, well, then there's a incredible risk, right? What if they're pregnant and they try and get a Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and then they get a blood clot, and then they lose their baby, or they die, and then the baby dies. Like, you got to take all those kind of things into account. And so, good for the FDA to pause and say, hey, like, let's look and make sure this isn't like a big deal. Thankfully we have a regulatory body that looks out.
Right. Well, and it does seem like the regulatory body of the FDA within the United States does put drugs under an incredible amount of scrutiny.
Yes.
I mean, not just from what you were talking, obviously a lot to do with what you were talking about earlier, but every single vaccine was approved in other places outside of the United States, most of the time weeks before it was approved within the United States.
Right.
And it's because the FDA is basically like, yeah, they can approve it, and that's fine if they want to approve it, but like, we're going to really look into this and make sure that it's safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And just under normal circumstances, it can take years, depending on what kind of, submission you're doing. If it's a completely new treatment, right? You're going to have clinical trials, you're gonna have all kinds of data, and they're going to, they're going to have to go through, and they're going to come to your site, and they're going to audit your site, make sure you have all your ducks in a row. Which we're audited pretty regularly, from FDA to boards of pharmacies to hospitals, you name it. And it's not like that's just a normal thing. It's not like, oh, my company's doing something wrong. They have to come check us out, right? Like, that is a normal thing. Once a year, we expect the FDA. Right. And they're going to stay a week and a half, and they're going to, with a fine tooth comb,
every single thing.
Yeah. All kinds of stuff. And so, but then they're flexible. So, it could take years. And honestly, like, this is a new drug that didn't have a whole lot of long-term data, right? Right.
And very little. And I think that's one of the big pushbacks from a lot of people that don't trust or don't want to get the vaccine is they're like, this thing was developed in less than a year. Right. Like, how do we have no idea what the effects are going to be on people. Like, what happens if we get 3 years down the road and people are growing lizard tails? Right. Like, what are we going to do? But
the FDA is, one, it can take it typically takes its time. And is some of that maybe red tape? Sure. It's a government body, right? Right. But they are also extraordinarily thorough. But then they're flexible. Like this COVID vaccine, like they expedited that and got emergency authorization to do so. I went to a conference. I love this. I nerded out when I heard this. And they had a speaker there. Her name is, I believe, I wrote it down, so excuse me for getting notes. Oh no, when I put my notes? Here they are. But she wrote a book about it, and I'm going to plug the book. It's called The Perfect Predator by Stephanie Strathdee. I hope I pronounced that right. Okay. But she told this story. She was traveling abroad, and she's like she's a professor at a university in California, at least at the time she wrote the book. I think it was in epidemiology. Read the book. She'll get her credentials are in there.
Very, very smart lady.
Yes. and knows a lot about disease and those sorts of things. And her husband got a cyst and it was getting operated on or like treated in Egypt. And there was like bacteria in there, and they were having trouble treating it. And so they had and then in the story she said, they were draining it, right? Or like a regular draining, and the tube, whatever, the nurse slipped and the bacteria got in his bloodstream. And it became, or already was or became, resistant to all antibodies. And so, wow. And so he was septic and was on death's door essentially. And she, I'm painting with a broad brush, but she, long story short, developed this treatment using viruses called phage therapy. And so, so viruses, one, they can affect us, they can affect plants. They also can infect bacteria, which is a lot of people may not know that. And they're called bacteriophages. And so she developed this phage therapy to where they found a virus that would attack the bacteria in his bloodstream.
What?
Yeah. And so so they essentially infected him with this virus.
Right.
And it began to attack the bacteria in his bloodstream. And it didn't quite solve the problem, because the thing too that's pretty relevant is that bacteria and viruses can evolve incredibly rapidly, because they multiply so quickly. And so what they found was that the bacteria had evolved to kind of resist a little bit to the virus, but in the process, it resensitized itself to certain antibiotics. So it couldn't fight both, right? It couldn't hold off the virus and also be resistant to the antibiotics. So what ended up happening, they did like a dual treatment with this phage therapy and antibiotics and cured him.
That is wild.
All that to say, they had to get emergency authorization from the FDA to treat her husband.
Right.
And they did it within, I think, a month or something. It was an incredibly short time frame where they were like, I mean, he was going to die. It was 100%. There was no question he was going to die unless they tried this treatment, right? And so they were like, okay.
Yeah.
And so they can be incredibly flexible.
Right. When needed.
Yeah, when needed. Yeah.
Right. That's so interesting. So one of the big things I think that you hear, and I think you probably hear this more from conservatives,
right.
That are kind of more, I don't want to say for big pharma, but they're at least, they're softer on big pharma, right? A lot of conservatives are like, big pharma in a lot of ways is kind of the backbone to our healthcare system.
Right.
Because they do make so much money that they're able to invest in research and development in incredible ways. And I think that a great example of this is this COVID-19 vaccine, where we had these gigantic pharmaceutical companies that, of course, are going to make billions of dollars by getting this COVID-19 vaccine out, right? But because they have this light at the end of the tunnel, this, kind of gold brick road at the end, that's like, we're going to be able to make a lot of money off this. They're able to dump billions and billions of dollars in research and actually developing something out.
Right.
Do you think that having gigantic pharmaceutical companies is more of a net positive than it would be a net, kind of negative? And I guess you're, at a much smaller pharmaceutical company. But
right. I would probably say a net positive, right? These companies, these companies didn't become big pharma and super successful because they were bad at what they do. Right. Right. A business doesn't become successful because they have a bad product or
unless
a bad
you're buying
service.
off Congress people, right?
Unless you're a politician, then no, I'm just kidding. But that's, and I think that's come to a head at this, this new, I guess, the WTO and the World Trade Organization, and Biden, was voting in favor of waiving the patent rights to these COVID vaccines, so that it would open it up, right? So if these big pharma companies don't have patents, then kind of anyone can. It's open season on that technology, right? And that they can, and a lot of the big pharma companies are like, well, one, they're like, we took we're the ones who fronted this risk and cost, right? And so, I'd be incredibly, I think it was a Pfizer. I read the Pfizer CEO in an article. He was like, this is going to completely disincentivize companies from taking this kind of risk in the future, because why take the risk, develop this new technology if we're not going to essentially
be able to reap the benefits of it,
reap the benefits, right? And then another portion is the quality, right? Like they have the facilities, they have the technology, they have the people that know what they're doing, and we've seen that they've made a quality product. But if you just open it up to anyone, well, they may not have the same kind of systems in place.
Right.
And so then what if they make, it's the same vaccine, but what if they mess it up somehow, right?
Right.
And then you might run into more, blood,
right,
any kind of negative side effects, right? And then the other portion is just a logistical, right? The pure raw materials. I think I read that to make, I think it was the Pfizer vaccine, it took 280 components sourced from 19 different countries. And so, that might just be, that could be, parts for the
syringe. But either way,
right?
That's an incredible amount of resources,
right? And from a very few locations, I feel like. And then their big concern was a backlog, right? Like if just anyone can do this, and then what if we run into shortages, right? Again, like kind of tying back to this drug shortage that I've talked about before, or we have commodities that are in short, like aluminum and wood prices are going through the roof because everyone's buying up wood. That's probably because they're rebuilding their back porch because they're working from home. But it all connects, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these big pharma companies, I think, are saying, no, like let us keep the patents, and we're already working to contract out and vet people that and different facilities that we can contract with and have them help us up production, right? But then that allows us to make sure that they meet our as in the big pharma quality standards, and that it is the Pfizer vaccine. It's not
right.
So I think a lot of people don't think about that, and when you're injecting things into people's bodies, right? Like it's a big deal. Like you could really mess somebody up,
right? Right. I mean, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why. I mean, it makes sense why, like, where you work, like the amount of scrutiny that goes into making sure that this one pill, and I mean, you're manufacturing millions and millions and millions of pills, right? A drug manufacturer, and if you have just one that slips through the cracks, you're gonna get dinged on it,
right?
And like that's unbelievable, and like I can't think of any other industry that is under that level of oversight, right? Where if you have, one tiny thing that goes wrong, it's like you're held accountable for it. You're held liable to it. And it makes sense.
Right.
Of course.
Well, and even, and you can kill people.
Right.
I mean, straight up, right? Like you, not only will like a regulatory agency hit you with some fines or, shut you down, but you could end someone's life, and that it's a very, like I said, there's that tension between, quality and quantity. And because you're trying to find that happy medium where you're like, you got the best quality and you're making the most and distributing the highest quality products at the most you can. Again, because I think it's a misnomer that the people in the pharmaceutical industry don't care about patients, right? Like I saw. Like I just Googled you just Google big pharma. Oh yeah. And there's like
all these evil, it's like literally villains from Batman.
Right. Like they have all these cures to diseases that they don't sell because they can, or like they have the cure for cancer.
Right. That's what I was going to ask.
Which I'm like, that is absurd. Like if you're to eradicate cancer, they will make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
They will make a lot of money.
Pharmaceutical companies make a ton of money off
cancer. But then your name will be in the history books forever.
That's one person, though.
Forever.
So, all right. So, play devil's advocate.
Okay.
All right. I'll play devil's advocate with you. So, I'm big pharma. I'm some big company, Pfizer, whoever it is. And I know every single year there are hundreds of thousands of people that are being diagnosed, maybe millions of people. I don't know how many people get diagnosed with cancer every year. There are so many people.
Right.
I feel like because of the industry, I would be incentivized to keep them alive as long as I possibly can, but to not cure them.
Right.
Because as soon as that cancer is cured, that money is gone. I'm not making any more money off of them. But if I keep them alive, but I keep them on X number of pills, I still get to manufacture those pills every day. Right?
Right. I think one...
This is a pretty wild statistic, by the way.
Yeah.
Apparently, in 2020, an estimated 1.8 million new cases of cancer like will be diagnosed. Like that's what they were like predicting.
Hmm.
It's like
So over 1 million cases of cancer a year.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
easily.
I think that's a bad argument
Okay.
for two reasons. Two big reasons. One, you're still going to make the money, right? And the fame, you're etched into history forever. I already said that. But then two, like kind of what we touched on, like viruses, bacteria, diseases are constantly evolving. There's always going to be something to treat. We're not in the foreseeable future, right, ever be where we're disease free. Where like there's no need for any kind of pharmaceuticals. Right. So to say that like, oh, well, let's just keep dosing these people and make money off them, I think that's a bad argument because there's always, right, there's this 2020 is a great example. We had a global pandemic, right, where they got to research, develop a vaccine, and they're making bukus of money off this new technology and this vaccine, right? Like, there's always going to be something that they can make money on, right? If they're a good company, right, and they're constantly doing R&D, developing new treatments, products, those types of things,
right. But to me, like any opiates, any type of drug that you are using that you're wanting a patient to take for an extremely long period of time, like, don't you have an incentive as a pharmaceutical company to keep them on that drug? Like, doesn't it help the company, right? Like, if you have somebody, I mean, it would make sense. Like, what if I came to you and I was like, hey, man, you have to buy a new car every single year or you're going to die. Right.
Well, I think, if you develop a completely new treatment that, one, doesn't addict people and, right, like, you could easily corner the market, let's say, right? Like all my competitors are selling you this stuff that, if treated long term isn't good.
Right. And will damage your body.
But we've got this new product, right? And I think that is somewhere maybe like Big Pharma could, because they have incredible influence. Right. They do. They have incredible influence.
That's one of the big arguments against, like, why Big Pharma is bad.
Right. And so, I mean, do I think that they could be more involved in pushing new technologies, new treatments? Probably. Yeah. I'm not involved. I don't know what's in the R&D pipeline over at Moderna and Pfizer, right? Like maybe they are. Maybe they've got a revolutionary cancer treatment. I read that this mRNA technology is actually being developed into cancer treatments. So, which I don't know. Have you gone into the pod of like how the vaccine works?
No.
So I geeked out. I researched it.
I was going to ask you. I was going to get into it because So I know almost nothing.
Okay.
About anything healthcare, anything science at all, which is why I need people like you to be able to come on and talk to me about it, because I literally am one of those people that are like, and like I feel like the vast majority of people that are like, they say it's safe, so I'm going to hope it is.
Right.
Because I have no idea how it works. I don't even know what mRNA is. I know that there's RNA and DNA.
Right.
That's the extent of my knowledge.
Right. So mRNA typically comes from DNA, right? But so the way that this, and the CDC, like if you go on the CDC, if you were to just type in, how does COVID-19 vaccine work? The CDC website has a very good, and I'm going to try and like regurgitate because it's a very good like layman's term, or as layman as you can make some of this science stuff explanation.
You're going to have to make it very layman for me.
But essentially the way this works is that you have this mRNA, which is which when put into a cell, right, the cell will generate a protein from that mRNA, and that protein is identical to the one in the COVID-19 vaccine or COVID-19 virus, excuse me.
Right.
And so that protein is then displayed on the surface of a cell. And there's even some of this that, and then your body recognizes that, oh, that protein's not supposed to be there. And then it responds, and then attacks it and develops the antibodies and things that it uses to then destroy it.
So the vaccine itself is not killing the virus. The vaccine is instead spurring the body on to create antibodies to kill the virus.
Right. And so, sorry, I'm like hitting something over there. My bad. And that's how, generally that's how most vaccines work, right? They either put an...
You want a little more burp?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Oh, yeah.
The answer to that is always yes. But that's how most vaccines, as a general concept, work. Right? They either introduce a weakened form of the virus, or whatever it is, and it prepares your body, right, to then fight that virus. And so
what makes the COVID-19 vaccine different from most other vaccines? Like, what's the mRNA differentiator?
So the mRNA, it's like I said, I think other vaccines use like a weakened form, or like how that necessarily works. I don't necessarily know. I could do research later and come back on the pod. Plugging myself for a follow-up sequel part 2. But where this is, it's purely just that little single strand of mRNA. So single strand mRNA is single stranded, but then the mRNA goes into the cell and then creates that protein that's displayed, and it's called a spike protein.
Okay.
And then because that's essentially how a virus that's almost how a virus works. Honestly, is and I always laugh. I'm a biology nerd, and they're like, you get Lysol. It's like kills 99% of viruses and bacteria.
Right.
And viruses aren't technically alive, so you can't technically kill them. But
well, there you go. There
are some biologists.
You just taught me that. So.
Right. There are some biologists that would argue that they're alive because they have genetic material. They replicate, and they're subject to natural selection. Right. We kind of touched on that because they can evolve, or they can evolve
incredibly quickly.
Yeah, incredibly quickly. Right. Which, as Christians, I think evolution kind of gets dumped on because there's people like evolution.
There's no such thing as evolution.
100%. Like evolution exists. All you have to do is look at a virus, bacteria.
Right.
They can change incredibly quickly because of how fast they replicate. And even this is we can get. I have a devil's advocate question for you.
Okay.
My genetics professor in college asked us. But a virus is essentially genetic material, whether it's mRNA or DNA, and then a protein capsid or coating on the outside. And typically, if someone's if there's a virologist. Thank you. I was not going to say that well.
A virologist or epidemiologist
that listens to the pod and can maybe you can have him or he or she on next, and they could really blow some people's minds. But the typical representations of a virus is that little like light bulb with legs.
Yeah, that is exactly what I think of. Like when I think of a virus, I literally think of like a cartoon with like this little. It's got like a little head, and it's got like this weird little stuff inside. He's got his little legs, and he's like a little spider, and he's like.
Yeah. And or it's the I think the COVID-19 is more like the sphere, right?
Yeah, the ball with all the little spikes coming out of it.
And so those are used to essentially bind to a cell, and it injects that DNA or RNA into the cell, and then
the virus itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Injects, like for lack of a better term, maybe.
Right.
To help people, and then, but I guess the difference between this vaccine and a virus is the virus. So the way the vaccine works, that mRNA, it does that protein, and then the cell breaks it down, right? And so it's incredibly safe because it never, like people are worried, like, oh, is this mRNA is going to affect my DNA? It never goes into the nucleus. It doesn't ever affect any DNA in our cells. So.
That was a big thing that I heard. Right. That it was going to be coming. It's going to be changing our DNA.
Right.
We're going to get this vaccine. Right. It's going to change your cell makeup.
Right. Does not interact at all with the DNA because it never enters into the nucleus, which is where all the DNA is
contained.
Yeah, contained in a cell. So.
Look at that.
And then the cell just breaks it down. Whereas when the virus infects a cell, whether that's our cells, bacteria, like I talked about earlier, or like a plant cell, is that it doesn't dissolve, right? It kind of, they use the word hijack, you might hear, and then it just becomes a virus factory, and it produces all the components, and then it assembles it, and then essentially it bursts, like kind of like an alien movie, right? And then thousands of viruses get released, and then
so viruses basically are reproduced and recreated within the cell,
right?
And then the cell explodes.
Essentially, yeah.
What?
That's typically what happens.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Having my mind blown here.
And and it's a exponential growth, right? Like, one virus can infect one cell, and then thousands are released, and then it just it's just it can take off. And then viruses too are incredibly small. I think they're like, I read a stat. They're like 1/100th the size of your average bacteria, and I'm like, you have to have a special microscope to even look at them or even see them. Yeah, because they're incredibly tiny. So it's like one little, and incredibly harmful. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, so do you think that we're going to start seeing, one of the big things that's a big concern right now is that we're going to start seeing more things like COVID-19, right? More viruses like it.
Right.
Do you think that like could be coming down the pipeline, or like because they evolve so quickly? Like, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I guess you have to have a flu shot every year, right? It's because they evolve so quickly.
Right.
There's different strains out there.
Right. Did I finish my thought on that? So I had a thought, and so I'll answer that question. But they're saying that this mRNA technology could be used in a cancer treatment. I don't know if I finished that thought.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay.
They similar kind of concept, right? That it could generate a protein to where it would essentially train your body to attack a specific type of cancer cell. So, it would. They would have to find, of course, like the right protein and a protein that differentiates the cancer cell from your normal living cells.
Right.
Which could be incredibly hard to do, I'm sure. That sounds super simple. Like, oh yeah, just find the right protein. Yeah, it's super simple. But, cancer cells are just your cells that
kind of go awry.
Yeah, go awry, essentially. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So the idea is basically they would be able to inject a vaccine into your body that would be able to create something specifically that would help your body to identify on a cellular level the difference between a cancerous cell
and recognize that it's bad, essentially. I think, and now that mechanism, I kind of, I thought about, I was like, I really could go down the rabbit hole, and like, it's just crazy to me. Like it blows my mind that like we have cells in our body that just kind of like float through our bloodstream, and how they recognize like, oh, that's not supposed to be there. Right. Like a single,
it's unbelievable.
That's wild to me.
The body
that blows
is
my
so
mind.
like everything is so perfectly like in tune and wired.
Right.
To be able to help you to continue to live.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's crazy. I was like, how? So anyway, I might go nerd out some other time and be like, how does your white blood cells like really recognize like, hey, this is a foreign material, or this isn't supposed to be here.
It's not supposed to be here. Attack it.
Right, because people have cancer and your body doesn't attack the cancerous cells. Right. So it obviously is not recognizing like, hey, these cells are a problem. Which would, if that is a successful treatment for cancer, that'd be awesome. I mean, the only treatments we have for cancer right now are to like surgically remove, blast with radiation, or to essentially poison your body. Right. That's what that's essentially what chemotherapy is you're poisoning yourself to where you won't die, but like it'll kill.
It kills.
It's awful.
Yeah, and I think that like we're gonna get 50 or 100 years into the future. Right. And we're going to look at that in the same way that we looked at people amputating limbs because they got shot or they got an infection. Right. Yeah. Because we look back on, like in the 1800s, it was like if you were to get a scratch on your arm and it got infected, you would go to the doctor and they'd be like, lock that thing right off. Right. Nothing else that we can do about it. None. Let's give him an ear nail. Right. He's going to be fine. Stick a nail in his ear. That'll help him. Right. And we're like, oh, man, they were so stupid back then. Can't believe they didn't realize what they were doing. Like, of course you can't just lop off somebody. Right. Like, what are you going to do? But I know 100 years from now, they're going to look back on the treatments that we give for different things, and they're going to be like, what? Instead of actually treating or curing it, you would just give them a drug that made it so they didn't feel any pain at all. Or instead of actually curing the cancer, or like you would just cut it out, or you would blast it with radiation. Right. Like radiation.
That's barbaric.
Cancer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's wild. What was your other question? Sorry.
I don't even remember now. So I can't remember what we were talking about.
I don't remember either.
So all that to say, where do you think maybe the pharmaceutical industry is going? Right, like it gets bagged on a lot. I am frequently, I think, a hater of the pharmaceutical industry because one, I think is from ignorance.
You hate me?
Yeah, I just don't like you specifically. No, one is because I think probably for ignorance. I just don't know a lot about it, and I think that it's demonized at like a high level in the media all the time. Right, like it's very easy to hate on big pharma. Right, and the United States loves businesses growing until they get really big, and then it hates big business. Right, at the governmental level.
Unless you're like Amazon or Apple.
Right.
Then you love them.
Well, there's a lot of there's a
that's
ton
true. There's
of
a lot of haters.
on it right now.
That's true.
There's a bunch of calls to break up Amazon and Apple and Google and all that. And there's, I guess, a good argument for that. But there's also a big argument to break up big pharma companies as well. Do you think those companies are ever going to get broken up? Do you think it would be beneficial for them to be broken up? Like, for example, you're talking about like the Joe Biden basically saying we could remove the patents for it. Wouldn't that essentially just allow for more competition? Like, do they not have a monopoly on everything right now? Right.
So, again, like, I think especially with the COVID vaccine, it's kind of a special case because it was like a special request. Like, people approach Big Pharma and were like, we need you.
Right. Because nobody else is going to be able to do it. Nobody has the resources.
Right. Exactly. And so that instance, I think, is a little bit different. Whether or not they're ever going to be broken up, I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm not a very great, like, you're an economics guy. Like, all that kind of stuff. That is like,
I do like the money side of things.
Like, you in biology is like me in economics. You know what I mean? like I just,
Fair enough.
I know a little bit about taxes because my dad's an accountant, but that's about as far as I got,
Fair enough.
But
do you think there's an argument to be made for breaking them up, or do you think their size is beneficial?
I don't know. I just feel like someone would I don't know. I always feel like someone replaces them, right? And so whatever way that looks like, I think that they can be. I think they could. Where I maybe could see them want to do more, and I think where the pharmaceutical industry is one of the big pros, I'm going to say, is like they can really push technology forward. I think I've seen that a lot just in my small locally owned pharmaceutical. Like our CEO, she always is all about new technology. Like if it could help us make more safer, faster, absolutely. I mean, it's really neat just to see the level of technology. And there's, of course, people are going to argue again, automation's like a bad thing, but and I've seen in the pharmaceutical industry, like, we've touched on, quality and cleanliness, and one of the biggest risk factors in the making of pharmaceuticals is us, like the human, right? We're dirty. We're gross. We're covered in bacteria, right? And it's not, like, that's just a normal thing. Like, I don't care if you bathe 3 times a day.
Well, it's healthy for humans.
Right. And so we are the, potentially the biggest source of contamination. And so, there's incredible upsides for, automation and technology. And I think, and just in general in our world, I think we're just going to see a more and more drive to technology. Like, I think regularly, like, I don't know if my son will even need a driver's license.
Right.
His car will probably drive. We have cars that drive themselves now.
Right.
Like Tesla cars will drive
in 15,
itself.
16 years?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why would you need a driver?
And so...
Man, that freaks me out. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the guy that's like 50 years old and everybody has self-driving cars. And I'm like, yeah, right. Yeah. I ain't going to be in there. I want to be able to feel the gear shift.
That's right. I got my truck.
Right.
It's got mud on it.
100%. I'm going to be like, I'm going to have my truck. And I'm going to be like, you can make my truck electric, whatever, but I want to drive it.
Yeah. But I think the healthcare industry, pharmaceutical industry, like, I think, and it's a good thing, I think, to really kind of lean into those technological advances, like this mRNA. Like, who knows the potential for some of these discoveries, right? And I think it'll be very interesting to see, like, some of the developments. Like, I remember in college, like, when 3D printing became a thing, or like kind of hit the mainstream. And then people were like, well, how do we could use this to grow people organs.
Right.
Like, and if we can do that, like the chance that your body rejects that organ is slim to none. It's your organ, right? It's from your DNA. It's from, how that would necessarily work. Yeah. I don't know, but it'd be crazy to think about. Right?
Yeah. And I think that one thing that's very difficult for us to wrap our minds around right now, because I think as human beings, very short-sighted. It's very difficult for us to be able to be like, all right, outside of this very narrow scope that I'm looking right now.
Right.
It's difficult for us to be able to see all of the incredible impacts that things are happening right now are going to have for the future. Right. And I think that we as human beings will look back on the year of 2020.
Right.
And the people that lived through it will be like, yeah, that sucked really bad. Right. Yeah. But the amount of new technology that was created and implemented as a result of the research that was done in order to be able to solve and stop this gigantic global pandemic is going to have far-reaching consequences for decades and decades.
Right.
And I think it's difficult for us to recognize that and see that,
Right.
Like when you think about all of the incredibly tumultuous periods throughout the history of the world, oftentimes tumultuous periods bring about incredible advancements in technology and incredible advancements in, kind of pushing the human race forward, right? You think about like World War II.
Right.
The amount of advancements in technology during World War II is unbelievable, you know, like rockets.
Right.
World War II.
Right.
Large, heavy machinery.
Right.
Right. The amount of it's incredible. Right.
And the speed to which you could make those. Right. The assembly line. That was World War II.
Right.
I always get
well, no, it was before World. Yeah, that was Henry Ford.
Yeah.
That was early 1900s. But I mean, it was being implemented throughout them. But it was, I think, in a lot of ways, kind of perfected during World War II.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And it's incredible because, you think about where the United States, where the world as a whole has come from since the last global pandemic happened, or a really large pandemic happened. That would be in swine flu, more than likely.
I remember swine flu.
Or not swine flu. I didn't mean to say swine flu.
Avian flu?
No, the Spanish flu.
Spanish flu.
Okay,
in
1918. Is that right? Is it called? Was it the Spanish flu? Yeah. All right. Well, that shows you how much I know about viruses. So, but when you think about that, like that was about 100 years ago, right? What they had, 1918.
Yeah.
Spanish flu.
Spanish flu.
flu. You were on it.
I was right. All right. See, I read the newspaper every now and then. So the technology that they had to deal with that then was so minuscule. It was so small. And if you think about if there was something like the coronavirus.
50 million deaths.
Yeah, 50 million deaths. Yeah, unbelievable. Is that global or is that in the United States?
I believe that's.
There's no way I was going to say there's no way that was in the United States. So the amount of technology that we have now to be able to, the fact that we were able to develop in 1 year something that would essentially, ethically defeat the vaccine,
Right.
or just defeat the virus, I mean to say, is unbelievable.
Right.
Absolutely, it's crazy. And I wonder, like, coming out of 2020, like with this new technology and this research that we have, like, what is that going to lead to?
Right.
Right? Like, are we going to have to worry about a lot more viruses in the future? Because we're going to, I mean, of course we will. But
right. Well, and, a lot of people are speculating that it'll revolutionize the vaccine game.
Right.
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 That, the reason why you get a flu shot every year is because it's a committee of people's best guess at what flu strains are going to be the most prevalent. And then they try and make a vaccine effective against those. And then a lot of the times, like, I feel like at best it's like 50% effective.
Right.
Right. Like at that point, I'm taking my coin toss chance at not getting it.
Right.
Which is really funny. Just a sign that, like,
look up the efficacy rate of normal flu vaccines.
What's the average is? Yeah.
Yeah. What's the average?
I'm probably going to be way off. I'm probably crapping on the flu virus. Like, they're normally 80% effective.
Well, like you think about the virus, the Pfizer vaccine.
Right.
I believe it has like a 96% efficacy rate, 93% efficacy rate.
And that's a transmission. I think from serious death and disease, it's even higher.
That's unbelievable.
Right.
What?
Right. And and like I said, they think it's going to, revolutionize some of these vaccines that maybe we even have to get regularly.
Regularly.
I'm struggling with the LYs or something tonight.
They're
I don't-
tough, man.
I know.
They're tough.
But or like what if we get a cure for cancer out of this?
Right.
Right? What if this these cancer, I don't know, the cancer developments, and they're like, hey, we can design
So
and
on
then
average, it's 40% efficacy.
less than 50.
Dadgum.
Garbage.
Garbage.
We have a debate, and it's really funny. I have a group of people I ate lunch with, and we had an intern who was a medical student, and he always was like, did you all get your flu shot? And he was like, none of us did.
Yeah.
No, he went around we went, like,
I don't.
did you?
I never get a
And he
flu
was
shot.
like, what are y'all doing? And we're like, bro, no. And most of us were like, if we got the flu shot, we still got the flu.
Right.
So what was the point?
Right.
So
The only time that I've ever had the flu, it was after I got my only flu shot. That
Right.
could be incredibly anecdotal and coincidental.
right, same.
Right.
I got it all the way up until college, and then when Mom didn't make me get it, I never got it. And
Right.
then I got it like 1 year when I was out of college, and I got the flu. And I was
Yeah.
like, I knew I
Screw
shouldn't
it.
have gotten it.
Not doing it anymore.
But then too, I think, and part of me wants to say we'll never not have big pharma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that's the same companies, but I think it was on Shark Tank where the guy it wasn't called Ring Doorbell, but the guy who invented Ring Doorbell went on Shark Tank. And it had some garbage name. I don't
Yeah.
really remember. It was really dumb. And they laughed. They
Yeah.
didn't want it. And it is a huge thing now.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So
Everybody has one.
who's to say that, a company doesn't develop this, that's not big pharma now, right? Develops this revolutionary technology.
Right.
And then it's incredibly successful. And then boom, they are now big pharma,
Yeah.
So are we ever going to be without them? I don't know. Probably not, because if the second someone has a great idea and it's successful, right, they're going to kill it, especially if they have the rights to their technology, which
Yeah.
could be an argument. I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say one way or the other, but,
Yeah.
but it's, so I remember I brought up my devil's advocate. So I had a genetics professor in college. You ever watched The Incredibles, the movie?
Of course.
You remember, Edna Mode?
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and do the accent.
Edna.
I'll probably offend somebody. But my genetics professor was like a human version of Edna Mode. Like, no joke. Like,
Wow.
short, the hair,
everything?
like everything.
awesome.
Even the accent was
Right.
probably a little on point. And she would just give us like kind of controversial statements or questions to kind of like every so often just to like poke our brains.
Yeah.
And she said, she goes, some people think that our modern healthcare and pharmaceutical industry has inhibited the evolution of human beings. And she was like, should we get rid of it and just go back to natural selection?
Right.
She's
Totally natural selection.
and if you think about it, right, we allow like essentially bad genes to propagate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people can live longer that maybe wouldn't, and they can pass on problems, So it's a very interesting question,
It's
right?
an ethical question.
Right.
Right. Like ethically, where do you get to? Where do you say, all right, you want to be able to see the furtherance of somebody's life,
Right.
at the expense of the human race as a whole?
Right.
Is kind of, I guess, where the question
Right.
come down.
Exactly.
That is an interesting question
Right.
to think about. And you know what it makes me think about a lot is the altering of genes.
Yeah.
To be able to
Yeah.
create the perfect superhuman. Because they're doing that right
Oh.
now. They're doing that with what's it called? Why can I not think of the name of it? I feel like it starts with a C.
I don't know.
I'll think of it in a second. But basically they're going through and they're figuring out different genes that they can specifically alter,
Right.
to be able to, create a person exactly in the way that they want to be able to create
Right.
that person. And countries are obviously investing heavily in it. One of those countries is China.
Oh, yeah.
And that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
That scares me so much.
One, especially because, China, do you remember the Body Worlds exhibit? Did you ever hear about that?
I don't think so.
So it was this, and we in college went down to Atlanta and it traveled around the U.S. and it was very controversial. It would go around museums, and
Yeah.
it was and we took it for anatomy because it was bodies that were plasticized. So so they essentially would inject, I guess, this plastic-like substance into bodies that were, and the controversy came, was like these bodies were donated for science, and they came out of China, if I'm not mistaken. And, there's a lot of questions of like, were they really donated for science?
Oof.
But then, it would be like, it was like actual humans, right?
Right.
And they would have like different organ systems on display, and they were like, and it looked like plastic, but it was a real body, right? And they, they even had like, the fetal development, and they would have different stages, and so that was of course controversial, and but all that to say, like, China doesn't have an FDA, right? Like, they don't give a crap. They want to test on people. They'll do
test
it
on who they want.
Yeah,
right. And like the idea and the thought of a government, especially if it has malicious intentions,
right,
going in and tweaking and changing. And it's like there's a difference between and it seems, I guess, maybe less sinister at first, right? When you're like, all right, I want my baby to have blue eyes. So you go in, you're like, I'm gonna tweak the gene, I'm gonna give it a little, turn that dial just a little bit, and I'm gonna give my baby blue eyes, right? It's like, oh well, that's not that bad. Who cares if you want your baby to have blue eyes, right? Or it's like, I want my baby to have curly hair,
right? And
you can go in and tweak that thing. What if it's, I want my baby to have super intelligence? Like, what if it's, I want my baby to have incredible fast twitch muscle fibers? Like, what if it's, I want to be able to create a human being that is going to have the physical stature and ability of LeBron James and the mental capacity of chess grandmaster Magnus Carlsen, right? And then you can go in before that baby is even comes out of the womb, when it's in its embryonic state, and go in and just turn those dials.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's not as straightforward necessarily as going and like turning a dial, right? Your genes and their expression, I mean, there has to be a lot of environment that shapes, how a lot of those things develop too. And so what would be an even scarier thought, right? It would be, okay, I want an army of people that are more prone to, or more docile, or like more prone to instruction. Like they won't fight. Like, like I'm a Star Wars nerd. And so like Order 66, but like theoretically, and maybe some scientists could DM you and be like, this guy's an idiot, but, and maybe, but who's to say, that you could tweak someone's genes in their, that would affect their brain development or their brain chemistry to make them more prone to suggestion. Right. And then, far more easy to brainwash. And then you just have your little, and then you could literally tell them to do anything and they will do it. Right. Right. And that's scary.
It is. It's incredibly Orwellian.
Right.
Right. It's very Brave New World.
Right. But then there's pros, right? Like, what if you could cure Down syndrome? Right. Like, who wouldn't, I don't know. Maybe I don't have a child with Down syndrome, but like, if you had the choice for your child to have a normal life,
or cure all of these things that occur, that are genetic, that happens at a genetic level, while the baby is developing. Yeah. Like, what if you can go in and make sure that child doesn't, isn't born with specific hereditary diseases? Exactly. What if, because there's a hereditary proclivity towards alcoholism, or a hereditary proclivity towards, or whatever it may be, you go in and you're like, all right, well, we can fix that. Right. Is that okay? Right. Right? Like, where does the gene altering stop? Right.
Yeah. And what point are you, and everything, it's important to remember too, like, everything has a trade-off, right? So, like, you could try and make someone super intelligent, but far often than not, like, those people are very socially, they lack social skills, right? And so, you can twist the dials all you want, but you don't necessarily know. I mean, humans are incredibly DNA,
it's incredibly complex.
And so, changing one thing, you might give you a pro here, but it's more than likely going to give you a con somewhere else.
Right. Until you have an AI figuring it out. Right.
Maybe.
Until you have,
or the
until
AI
you have,
becomes, gets itself a body or
right.
something.
Then we get into iRobot. Right.
There we go. Then Terminator, and then we're
Terminator.
then we're all
real
gone.
life. Which maybe we're a couple years down the road. I don't
Hey,
know.
you know what? I'll name my next son Sean Connor, so that we've got some built-in security.
Right, right. Next son, do you have something to tell us?
No. I won't. Because I said that, I'm gonna have the rest of them are girls. Which would be fun. Like,
Of course.
it'd be great.
Well, yeah, because you are a new dad. For those that don't know,
Yeah.
old Jeet, he's a new dad. He's got a. How old is baby Jeet?
He
And you have to
is-
say his name out loud so that way everybody understands the gravity.
Right. He is James Truitt Brittingham the fourth.
The fourth.
The fourth.
That's man. That is a serious name right there.
I know.
James Truitt Brittingham the fourth.
I know.
He's got to grow up and do something big.
I know.
You can't have a name like that.
Or at least move to England and get knighted or something, right? So you can add like Sir and then
Right.
I don't know, be a Duke or
Right.
something. I don't even know if that's possible.
I don't know.
We'll
I'm
Game
not-
of Thrones some stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I'm not super well versed in British politics,
Yeah.
unfortunately. I know a little thing or two about American
Oh, yeah.
politics.
We'll trace my heritage back.
Yeah.
I'm British somewhere down the
Yeah,
line.
somewhere,
so,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
All of us are a mix
Yeah,
at this
yeah,
point.
yeah.
But,
But,
yeah, so new dad. How was
dad.
it having a kid?
So my dad asked me, we were at a baseball game, just me and him, and he was like, what has like fatherhood been like, what you thought it was? Like, what are your thoughts, I guess, essentially on it? And it's like hard to put into words because like he very honestly and truly like brings me more like a unique and joy that like I can't describe. Like if I could, and I kind of could at this point, I don't want to get too political, but like get paid to stay at home and
Yeah.
just like make him laugh and smile all day, I would do it.
Yeah.
And like, you know what I mean? Like, and I
Yeah.
love my job. Like I'm not crapping
Yeah.
on my work. And that's been like a weird, like the whole like pregnancy process.
Which was totally different for y'all
Right,
because
exactly,
it was through
because
the
of COVID,
pandemic.
which a lot harder on my wife.
Right.
Let's say that way
Well,
up front.
It always is, right?
Way up front. Like, yeah, I like talk about the pregnancy process like I had anything to do. Right? Like I did not.
All you did
I will
was
fully
stir the
acknowledge
batter
that.
a little bit, right?
I tried to
She
keep
baked the cake.
I tried to make her as happy as and comfortable as possible. That's
Yeah.
about
we'll have
the
Mary
best I
on
could
and see
do.
if that's true.
That's right. Oh yeah, she probably. We might need a therapist.
She
No,
might
I'm just
disagree
kidding.
with that.
But I mean, yeah, it was like we like found out like we had to, and it was hard because we knew we were pregnant and we were trying to like, and this is right when, so we found out in March. So right when, and like we found out and then
2 weeks to slow the spread.
right. Yeah. And then here we are. Right. And then,
Right.
but it was, we found out and we were trying to plan and go, varying states were at different states of people can come, people can't come. And we were desperately wanting to go up to Virginia. My wife's family's in Virginia. And, we were trying to like plan that trip. And then like right before is like Virginia just shut down.
Yeah.
And her parents were like, hey, like, I know y'all were trying to come up and see us. They didn't know. And so we had to tell both of our sets of parents over FaceTime,
Yeah.
which was,
That's a bummer, man.
Yeah, it is. It is a bummer. I mean,
It is what it is.
thank God for technology, right?
Right.
Thank God we have like something where we can have like see our parents across the country. Because I
Right.
mean they're border in the Northeast and we're down
Right.
here, at least 6 hours away from
Right.
by car. So that we can in real time like talk to them, see their face. Like, of course they cried.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so, but then, we found out the gender and had to do a gender reveal over, Skype, FaceTime, or like
The
a
gender
Zoom.
reveal things, I do not understand.
Well, we
I
were
don't
never
get
going to
that.
do like, we're never
Go outside
gonna-
and pop the balloons and have a
yeah,
big party and try to burn
I
down
mean,
half of
maybe have like a
California.
cake with some like blue icing or something in
Right,
the
right,
middle,
right.
Which had a buddy. His daughter was actually due on the same day as James, and their gender reveal. He's a big gun enthusiast, and he was in the guard for a while. But then their gender reveal, he had I don't know what kind of rifle it was, but then they had some sort of something. He shot it and went like a bunch of. I hit the mic. Hope that didn't do anything. Like a bunch of pink smoke for their daughter.
Right,
and I was like,
right.
Classic. But
that right there, you're in the South.
Oh yeah,
that's your.
Someone's on a tree
reveal.
stump with a rifle. You know.
Go to this door.
That's
Right.
But then, and it's been, and then obviously we were incredibly thankful that when we had James, like the hospitals kind of loosened their visiting rules. So we were allowed to have, after 24 hours, we were allowed to have 2 guests at a time. Technically 3, but the husband counted as a guest.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
Which pre that time, like we had some friends like a couple months before have babies, and like the husband had to go into the hospital with the wife, like couldn't like go drop her off, park the car, and come back. They had to enter the hospital at this same exact time, and he literally could not leave anywhere to go anywhere.
That is wild.
I could not leave the room unless she went with him, and like there's a whole lot of regulations on that. And then so thankfully like those loosened, right? So I was able to park the car,
right?
But like that's hard. Like essentially you'd have to get someone to drive you.
Yeah.
And then babies don't they don't send you a little
they don't send you a text.
Yeah,
like,
they don't send you a calendar invite saying, "Hey, I'm coming 9 a.m. this Friday.
Right,
Mark your,
right.
we'll give you an hour alert, and then a second alert 30 minutes before." And so, so I mean, like even little things like that are like a blessing in all honesty. And we were able 24 hours later to have 2 guests. So our parents, and they, the visiting hours like 8 to 12. And so they came for like about an hour and a half each set of parents. And then, so that was really awesome that they could just come see him and us in the hospital. And then, but it's been, I know we've talked like not on the pod. It's been weird. So I've always worked in the office. I've I've never worked from home. Which is
even through the pandemic,
right? And we make essential drugs that people need, right? Like people don't stop getting sick there's a pandemic, right? People are sick, but then people don't stop having their normal issues, right? So I mean, we're essential, so we were working. So and it had its pros and cons. Like it honestly helped the whole pandemic feel more normal than most people experienced, because like I would, I still went into work. I saw my coworkers, and I still had like my Monday through Friday schedule was very much, unchanged. Right. Because I mean that's the majority of what I do. Right. Is like work 8 hours, come home and see my wife, eat, and and so that was a pro. I ended up seeing that as a pro, right? Like, and then cons. I mean, like we had cases of COVID, obviously, because I mean, where didn't? Right. And so we had our, fair share, like the guy, and it became frustrating because like the guy doesn't work anymore, with us, but I had a guy that shared a cubicle with me, and he literally sat probably even a little bit closer than me and you are right now. Cause I could literally like reach out and touch him. Yeah. And he got COVID. And like that was probably the biggest scare I had, because when I was at my desk, I just like wouldn't wear my mask. Right. And, people can poo on that if they want, but then anywhere walking around anywhere else wearing my mask. Yeah. And then found out later from I think after he left, he like quit. But then I had a coworker tell me, he was like, "Oh yeah, he was like meeting up with women from like online dating sites from like different areas of the state and stuff." And I was like, "Are you what?" I was like, what do you mean? I was so mad. Like,
especially because you're sitting there, you got a pregnant wife at home. You have no idea how coronavirus is going to affect any of that because everyone's so new. Yeah. And this dude's out gallivanting around.
Yeah. Meeting up with random women.
That is
like not going down to like the local 5 Points, right? Like going, he met girls in like Charleston,
just
like
random people. That's unbelievable.
Completely random. Yeah.
Well, so and that is one thing that's been fascinating is like talking to people and hearing the dramatically different experiences
yeah.
that everybody had.
Yeah.
Like there are some people that were going into work every single day.
Right.
Like their life for the most part didn't really change.
Right.
You know? And then you talk to other people that like maybe didn't care about it at all. Like,
Right.
oh, I don't believe any of this is true. Like it's not going to affect me. I don't really care. And then other people that were like, I heard last March that in March of 2020 that all this was going on and I have not left my house since.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
It's the amount, like it's so incredibly vast, the differences.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, some of it I think has to do with just misinformation or poor information.
Yeah.
But a lot of it has to do with the fact that like it just goes to show that like every human being is just going to do what they want.
Right. Yeah. And it's been like, and then now that my son is here, it's been harder, right? Like I got my 2 weeks that I took to like be home and help Mary and
Biden's trying to change that.
Huh?
Biden's trying to change that. He's
The
trying
what?
to make it mandatory paternal and maternal leave of I think up to 6 weeks.
Wow. The paternal, the maternal definitely.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
to be honest, like if I'm pretty shocked that there are places that don't have maternal leave.
Right.
And then like to be honest, the vast majority of people that I know, their company at least offers like a week of paternal leave.
Yeah.
Like some sort of something.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's becoming more commonplace. But it'd be interesting to see if, because people are working from home, like if that is really going to become a sticking point for some people, because they're like, and I think that's been hard for me, is that like I have friends that work from home that we have a lot of friends that have babies close to the same age as
We're at
James.
the
Like,
age.
right. So like they were like a couple weeks before, a couple weeks after, which has been a lot of fun. And then most of those dads have been working from home. And so
Right.
they get to, I mean, even if they're working in like an office somewhere, they can,
least
pop
see
out of
their
their,
baby.
pop out of their lunch
Right.
break, take a 10-minute little siesta, and go get a snack and, tickle their son. And,
Right.
and I've been like very envious of that because I
Yeah.
think, but then I like remind myself, I'm like, I'm living normally.
Right.
Right. Like
Or
my
at
friends,
least what used to be normal.
My friends more than likely will end up like back in the office one day.
Yeah.
More than likely.
More than likely. Yeah.
Or at least like back in the office more than they are now.
Yeah.
And so like I just have to kind of remind myself and that like, okay, like they're going to be in for the rude awakening
Right.
here shortly.
And my life is just,
right.
this has just always sucked for me. Right. It's going to suck for them eventually.
Right.
But right now it's just me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I mean, of course I'd be lying if I say it wasn't hard to like, and want that time. But, so then also incredibly blessed. Like
Right.
I've been thankful that I have a job in the field that I do because, I think like we talked about, like everyone's always going to need medication,
Right.
medicine.
That's a fact.
Like, and so that's not going anywhere. So incredibly thankful that I had a job.
Yeah.
And that it pays well.
Yeah.
Like I'm,
Yeah.
like I'm not hurting by any means.
Right.
So,
Right.
and so,
It's a beautiful thing for sure. It's a
yeah.
huge blessing.
I know, which
Right.
like, I'm one of those, I know you talk about in your podcast, like, I don't need that stimulant. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I've literally never left the office.
Right.
So,
Right.
in terms of, the work day. And
Yeah.
so, did we use it? Like you said, to pay off some debt?
Of
Bet you
course.
we did.
Right. That's what most
You
people did.
betcha we did.
That's what most people did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Word. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, man. This has been awesome.
Dude, I'm super glad you got to come on. I think
know.
you had some really awesome insight around, I think, an industry that's incredibly misunderstood, but also probably due to ignorance. There's not a lot of people that I think that are kind of educated, especially in the manufacturing
Right.
side of pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So insight was definitely
Yeah.
much appreciated.
I
Very
think a big
interesting for
takeaway
sure.
too for people is like the vast majority of like doctors, pharmacists, people even in the manufacturing side, like they don't do this because they don't care for people. Like especially like doctors, pharmacists, they don't go to like 8+ years of school and residency to like and then not care, right?
Right.
I mean, some obviously do. Like, there's going to be exceptions,
There's
but like,
gonna be-
especially at the beginning, they of course they care.
Right.
Like, you don't subject yourself to that and hate it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I of course, maybe I'm a glass half full, silver linings kind of guy.
Optimist.
But I'm thankful that I was brought back into the medical field through my experiences. Like, right, I wanted to be in medicine. I wanted to care for people, right? And I was kind of thrown a wrench when I was told, like, hey, like, you're not going to be able to go to med school and do that.
Yeah.
And then to be brought back to medicine, but in a different way.
Yeah.
And still being able to kind of feel and live out that calling of, like, I can care for people. I can make sure that what they take, or like what is put into their bodies, is going to be effective. It's going to be safe. It's going to do what it's supposed to do. And they can, so it's been cool.
Yeah. That's awesome, dude.
That's why we do it, man.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate you.
All right.
Thanks
for having me on.
coming on.
I'd
Absolutely.
come back. We can do like a nerd podcast, and we'll nerd out on
Geek
some
out,
stuff.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate you a ton.
Yeah.
I guess we can go ahead and roll it off there.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Split the Difference podcast, written, recorded, and hosted by Austin Taylor. If you're interested in getting in touch with me on Instagram, you can find me at Split the Difference Podcast. I'm on Facebook and YouTube at Split the Difference, and on my website at splitthedifference.com. Production for the intro and outro music done by Rosewood Records Recording Studio. If you're interested in booking or learning more about them, you can reach them on Facebook or Instagram at Rosewood Records SC, or on their website, www.rosewoodrecordssc.com.